You know what? This Shootout would have been amazing in like 1997. Hey everyone, I'm Jack Fossett. Welcome to this Fender Tube Amps Shootout. Today we are putting the Fender Blues Junior against the Fender Blues Deluxe. Now before we dive in too far, I do want to say thank you to my friend Michael Corletto. Michael lent me his Fender Blues Deluxe so that I could do some videos with it. He is a very talented country singer, songwriter, and guitar player, and I've been playing in his band for several months. So please check out his music. He's a really talented guy. And more importantly, I told him that in exchange for lending me the Blues Deluxe that he would become super famous. So do me a solid, fellas, here. These are two amps that are incredibly different for how similar they are, and they both harken back to the 90s, right? The Blues Deluxe came out, I believe, in 93, and the Blues Junior came out in 95, kind of taking this idea of the old Fender Tweed amp and making it a bit more modern for modern players. In no doubt part of the blues resurgence that was spearheaded by Stevie Ray Vaughan beforehand, even though he had passed away, with Eric Clapton returning to some of his blues roots at the time, and all kinds of other great blues players. It was just, you know, a resurgence. You also had things like the Boss Blues Driver around, and blues was becoming a thing again, also counteracting grunge and, you know, just the various ways that music kind of transfer. And these amps have survived, and they've gone through many different iterations. These are kind of the modern iterations. This is a modern Blues Deluxe. This is a Fender Blues Junior 3 limited edition Tweed, which is still available even though it's not the newest one. It's one of the most kind of enduring Blues Junior models that's out there, though. And being two amps that are relatively similar in features, relatively similar in size, we'll say, and relatively similar in price, many of you might be wondering, do I get one or the other? Do I get the Blues Junior? Do I really need the more beef that you might get from the Blues Deluxe? What are the differences in tone? What are the differences in feel? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. I think what these both excel at is as a clean amplifier and then to be used with pedals, and I am going to do a combination of using them with an overdrive and also just using the tones that you can get out of the amp in this video. The overdriven tones that you're hearing are from a Boss Blues Driver. Might as well kind of keep it all thematically similar, but I'm not running anything else. Everything else is going just from the amp, and I am going to show you the amps drive on their own. But I do think that that's how these amps work best. I think their shining quality is that they get some nice usable Fender clean tones. Now, I'll be very, very upfront when I say about these amps. They're They're good, reliable amps that you can get a good tone out of and you can modify with pedals. Are they great amps? No, I don't think so. I feel like they both leave a lot to be desired. And to a certain extent, I do think Fender settled. I think they said, to a certain extent, they said, well, this sounds good enough, but people will buy it because it's a Fender Tweed amp that says blues on it. And to their business credit, they were right, because these are extremely popular amps. You see them around everywhere. They've been around everywhere for decades. Now we get to the differences. Now, what's really interesting for me is when I did this video, and I have experience with both of these amps. I've owned a number of each of them. This is my own Blues Junior. Again, I'm borrowing the Blues Deluxe, but I've owned several Blues Deluxes in the past. What's interesting for me is when I shot the video, when I was in the room with the amps recording, I preferred the sound of the Blues Deluxe. But then in editing the video and listening back to the playback, I actually liked the tone of the Blues Junior better in a lot of cases. So that was kind of a weird thing for me to, usually it's more straightforward, you get what you get in the room and on the recording, but there was a sort of a lovely charm and kind of a squish and sag to the Blues Junior. The Blues Deluxe had this much more open, full range, clear tone. And in some cases I liked that better, but overall I thought that the Blues Junior actually sounded a little sweeter in many situations. Now, again, kind of going into similarities and differences, the Blues Junior, you've basically got one channel, but with a foot switchable fat boost, right? So it's kind of it's functionally something that you can use like a two-channel amp, because the fat switch does give you a pretty raucous boost. Particularly if you have the volume set higher, that gives you kind of a nice beef up and a nice extra little bit of drive there. So you can kind of use it like it would be a two-channel amp, even though it's really not. The Blues Deluxe, conversely, is a two-channel amp, but the differences aren't really that much. The drive channel doesn't really have a lot of drive. It kind of just gives you this like edge of grit sort of sound. Again, great if you're into Stevie Ray Vaughan, but even though it's a two-channel amp, the second channel doesn't really give you a whole lot more. That would be more like the Hot Rod Deluxe, which was a very, very similar amp in the lineup. However, with this amp, there are two additional features that you get that I particularly like that the Blues Junior doesn't give you. One is a second low-gain input, and I think if you're using the Blues Deluxe, you absolutely have to use the low-gain input, because the high-gain input is just a little too much like that, right? It's like Jim Carrey in a movie, whereas the low gain input is a little bit more like Paul Rudd. It's very, very funny, just as funny, but in a much more relaxed kind of way. Now, also, the Blues Deluxe has the preamp out, power amp in, which is used like an effects loop. So if you're somebody who uses a lot of effects and you want to run into the effects loop, you've got that option. My honest guess would be most people using these amps aren't really going to have much need for effects loops. This kind of vintage amp, you get a lot of players who use these amps who just go direct in, who don't use any pedals at all, or use a very minimal pedal board. So that will be a huge selling feature for some, but probably not for everybody. But it is kind of cool to have. Now, one really notable difference between these two is that the Junior has EL84s, whereas the Deluxe has 6L6s, the more classic Fender power tube, which the power tubes don't really come into play tonally until you get the amp really warmed up and really loud, which with the Blues Junior, you actually could get that in a real-life context. So I think they make a big difference in the Blues Junior. In the Blues Deluxe, one of the interesting things about these is they do have that kind of like crazy shower knobs, you know? You know the showers where like you go to a hotel and you're not used to the shower and you turn the knob, and sometimes it has a really nice sweep, and other times you turn it like an eighth of an inch and all of a sudden your flesh is melting off. That's kind of what the volume knob is like on the Blues Deluxes. They may have solved that problem in later ones, but as you'll notice, the volume in the video is not up very loud at all on the Blues Deluxe, and yet I was easily at like above rehearsal volume, kind of just shy of small gig volume when I was recording this video. So that really limits its usability if you're talking about playing at home. Now, the other obvious big difference is just the wattage, right? The Blues Junior is 15 watts, whereas the Blues Deluxe is 40 watts. Now, the Blues Junior has more than enough oomph to play a lot of gigs, and in fact, I played a big gig with Michael at a place in Maine called Vinegar Hill, which is a big converted theater, like it used to be for stage productions. Now they use it as a music venue. And Michael used his Blues Junior for that gig and mic'd up, and it sounded phenomenal. And we weren't even really putting too much through the mics. It just had a lot of presence. The Blues Junior has a lot of power when you want it to. What the Blues Deluxe gives you more from its wattage, will certainly get more clean headroom. But the other thing is again, you get that kind of wider frequency range, right? It doesn't kind of compress and sag as much as the Blues Junior does. It's just that much more big open tone, which for some cases in certain guitars can be great, and other times you might want the kind of sag and squish of the Blues Junior. Now, I really think that quality-wise, sound-wise, features-wise, I mean, I think they do both kind of sit where they belong, and I think they complement each other well. You know, a lot of people won't need the effects loop. They won't necessarily need the bigger, wider frequency range or the insane amounts of volume that you get from the Deluxe. Well, then you get the Blues Junior. If you're someone who gigs a lot and uses a more extensive pedal board, and you play a variety of venue sizes and you want some clean headroom and not to worry about it, and also if you do like the idea of the really dedicated 2 channels to jump off of, the Blues Deluxe might be for you. So what we're about to do is play through a bunch of different settings. Going to do some clean drive from the amp and drive from the pedal, the Boss Blues Driver. With the 2 guitars that I'm using in this video, I'm using a Fender Telecaster that's loaded with a custom set of single-tone pickups, and I'm using a Gibson Les Paul. Please let us know what you think. Which one do you prefer? Which one do you like better? As someone who's a fan of Fender amps and has had the opportunity to play a lot of Fender amps, I'm more of a fan of the Blues Junior, and the reason is because it kind of does its own thing more. The Blues Deluxe, I've always felt left a little bit more to be desired, and it was kind of trying to be amps that it's not, and there are other amps in the Fender lineup that do what the Blues Deluxe is trying to do, but they do it better. I think the Blues Junior, for all it is and for all it's not, it's this kind of charming little plug-in and rock box that works, it does what it does, and if you know how to dial it in, it can just sound great. Now, if you're interested in either of these, you will find a link in the description to where you can buy them. Those are affiliate links. If you shop through those links, I get an extra commission at no extra cost to you, which is a great way for you to get some cool new gear and support the channel at the same time. If you do any shopping through those links, it helps me out. Other ways you can support the channel, hey, you will find my Venmo and PayPal down in the description. You can send me a tip or a donation, and if you send me a tip or donation of $7 or more, I'm going to give you free downloads of all of my music. That's right, not only all of my music now, but all of the music I will ever do. You will have access to anything that I have done or will do. Why $7? Well, because we're working on our 7th kid. 7 kids, 5 daughters. Can you believe that? That also includes many jam tracks, including the ones like what you heard at the beginning of this video, which most of them are from original songs that I've written. So feel free to check out my music on my site on Jack Fossett Official, YouTube, or if you send a donation, you will get access to all of those downloads. So let us know which amp you prefer. Do you own one of them? Which one do you own from a number of different eras and things? Please let us know in the comments. I'm Jack Fossett. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video.